Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Get Your Popcorn. We have a returning guest today, who's my very first guest ever on this show. So welcome back, Harry Marks. Can you introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about you?
I'm Harry. I'm the host of Let's All Go to the Lobby on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. You can find me at Lobby Intros. I'm also the classic film host for the streaming app Mometu, mometu.com, and I do classic film introductions to, or I do introductions to the classic films on the app. So I've got one that I'm doing today for Leave Her to Heaven, starring Gene Tierney, but I've done for Dracula and Frankenstein and The Hitchhiker. I mean, I think I've done over 50 intros at this point.
Yeah, you did House on Haunted Hill too, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Yes, because I did that one with Brian, and so I saw your intro for that when I
Yep.
watched. So
It's good prep material.
yeah, absolutely. So this week, well, we're recording in November, but this will be the first, I'm doing a couple Christmas movie episodes in December. And so this is the first one. So we're doing my favorite Christmas movie and yours too, It's a Wonderful Life. So can you tell me a little bit about, how you got, when you first saw this movie and what you like about the film and just a little bit of background on your kind of coming to the film?
I honestly don't remember the first time I saw this movie. It was a while. It was years and years ago. And then I had come back. I had not watched it for probably a decade, and then I came back to it, around the time my son was born, and he's 11 now. And ever since then, it's been a yearly watch on Christmas Eve. It's the one we watch right before Christmas every year. So yeah, it's a perfect film. It is just a perfectly paced film. It's very idealist in its message and everything, but I think that's what we need around the holiday time. Yeah, it's a film that makes you feel good no matter what. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just perfect.
Yeah, I think I describe it the same way. It was something that I feel like I also don't remember like when I watched it because it's just so like on cable, basically November 15th on as a kid, it was just on. Like you could turn on the
Yeah.
TV any point in time. Very similar to like how Shawshank Redemption used to run like all year. You basically turn on the TV on a Saturday and It's Wonderful Life was on during the holiday season.
Yeah, I mean that's how it got so popular in the first place. And I think a lot of people know the story, but the copyright had lapsed in the 1970s, and it was just something to air on television to fill the gap, and people just started watching it every year. And it gained this almost cult-like status until it became just a mainstay hit for every holiday season.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then I took a break. This was like my first watching of this film in 2 years. I had a friend pass away from suicide right before Christmas
Oh, I'm
2 years
sorry.
ago. Actually, the day before I was supposed to watch this film. And so I hadn't been able to touch the film in a while. And it gave me it just made me love the film like even more. I'm like, I cannot believe that this film came out in the 1940s. Like it is so fresh.
Yeah.
So timeless.
It really is. It's one of those films that, I mean, for all of the clearly historically accurate, like not even historically accurate, just like to the time period stuff, like the drugstore and the cars they drive and stuff, like it can feel very dated, but because the message and the dialogue and just the things that these people go through in their lives are so evergreen, it never feels like it has outstayed its welcome or that it doesn't hold up anymore. Like it doesn't need to be remade. Everything that has been said in this film has been said already. It is perfect the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so good. I don't know too much about the development of like the idea, but I know that you do. Do you mind sharing a little bit about how the film kind of came to be initially? What sparked the initial idea on them wanting to do it?
Yeah, it had sparked. It was based on a short story by Philip Van Doren Stern. The story was fine. It was a cute little sentimental short story. He had tried to get published. I think he ended up just sending it out as a Christmas card one year, and it found its way to a producer's name. Was it Hal Wallace? I can't remember. Whoever found it at the studio thought it would be a good fit, and so they brought in Frank Capra to direct. He had done Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He's very big on the sentimentality. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. You can't take it with you. And he was sort of the perfect fit for that. But yeah, it went through a lot of development in terms of script. It went through a number of writers, Dalton Trumbo, Clifford Odets, Mark Connolly, the playwright, until finally it was Frances Goodrich and her husband, Albert, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I have it here, actually. Albert Hackett, who those two really wrapped up the script based on what the others had done earlier. Clifford Odets is the one who really gave us a lot of what we see in the final film. For example, the Gower drugstore scene with the medicine mix up. That came from him. I believe the rescuing his brother from the ice lake was him. So a lot of the stuff that we've come to recognize in this film is because of Clifford Odets. And Odets famously was the really one of the only people who testified at the House Un-American Activities Committee. Which is why he wasn't blacklisted from Hollywood, not outright, but his peers blacklisted him. Even though he didn't really give names or testimony in the traditional sense, the fact that he spoke at all rubbed them the wrong way. Trumbo, on the other hand, went to jail for a year because he refused to testify. So all of that. And then if you look at the previous versions, and it's funny, I have this book here on the making of It's a Wonderful Life. This is published in 1986. I grabbed this on eBay. This has a lot of the original stuff that never made it into the final picture. So, for example, in the early versions of the script, there was a version where there were two Georges, and George was not the son of the owner of the building and loan. He was a politician, and so we get to see what it would have been like if he had not gone into politics or had gone into politics. There was one where it was just an evil George. There was an evil George and a good George, and what would have happened if evil George had been allowed to prosper. And that's where you get Potterville. There's even a lost scene, not even lost, I don't think it was ever recorded, but it was in one of these scripts at the end of the movie where everyone gathers in the living room and sings Auld Lang Syne, and they rescue George from his financial hardship. There's a scene that was written in where Potter shows up, and he's outside and he has the money in hand, and he's expecting, or he's hoping to, I guess, make amends or rectify the situation in some way. And then he hears everyone singing and he rolls away, realizing they're never going to accept me. This is not my place. I'm just going to go home and be a dirty capitalist. And that never makes it into the final film. And I actually like it that way. I think it is a much better film and a more realistic film, honestly, where Potter just goes on being Potter. And capitalism churns on and ruins more lives, just like Potter was doing. And that's it. But it's about George and the fact that for all the work he did for the community, a lot of it unsung, a lot of it unappreciated at the time. When it matters, everyone comes back and rallies around him and helps him the way a community is supposed to.
I have to take a quick, I love your shirt. Is that a Golden Girls
It
shirt?
is. It says "Stay Golden."
That is amazing. I love that. Sorry, that was totally off topic. Yeah, I'm glad they didn't change they didn't change that in it either. Like, I like that it's just focused on George and the community and has that like sort of isolated moment, and that Potter has to be like alone. There's this community that's rallied around George entirely. I mean, they can't even all fit inside the house. And Potter, is alone by himself with his like queer coded servant.
Yes. His Smithers, yeah. Um, and it's interesting because Lionel Barrymore was a very wonderful guy, just a very nice, genuinely good guy. And he's the one who convinced Jimmy Stewart in the first place to take the role. Jimmy Stewart had just come back from World War II. He wasn't sure he wanted to get back into acting or how he could get back into it. He was a changed man after serving in the Air Force, I believe. He saw the script and was like, I don't think I can do this. This is too much. And Barrymore was the one who said, no, you need to do this. This is how you're going to work through. They didn't have the term PTSD at the time, but that's what he was working through. And Barrymore knew this is what he needed to get through it. So it's because of him that we got Jimmy Stewart in the first place.
Yeah, I was reading that one of the other people they had considered was Jimmy Stewart's like very close friend, Henry Fonda, who I think would have been good, but definitely not as good. Like, this is one of those performances where you're like, I can't possibly, like a Clark Gable is Rhett Butler. You're like, there's no way this can be anyone else.
It's funny, in the book here, there is a list of the characters in the story and who they were considering for each role. And so for Potter, let's see, Louis Calhern, who, if you've seen Duck Soup, he plays the the ambassador to Fredonia, I think, or the other Sylvania. I can't remember the other country. Leon Ames, who's the dad in Meet Me in St. Louis. Let's see, Edward Arnold, George Bancroft, Charles Halton. Just a who's who. And then you've got, it's funny, the only person they have listed for George is Jimmy Stewart. Mary, they were considering Olivia de Havilland.
She would have been awesome too. Like, I love Reed, but Olivia de Havilland could have done a tremendous job with it.
Oh, absolutely. Henry Travers, who I believe plays Clarence, was originally considered for the role of the father, Peter Bailey. Yeah, it's just very funny to see who they were considering for all these different roles.
Yeah, and then so we've got Lionel Barrymore as Mr. Potter, Thomas Mitchell as Uncle Billy, Henry Travers as Clarence. Balua Bondi as Mrs. Bailey, Frank Phelan as Ernie, and Ward Bond as Bert, and those are kind of our, like, the
Yeah,
bigger role in the film.
Beulah Bondi is funny because she's played Jimmy Stewart's mother, I think, in like 8 films, 8 or 9 films. And it got to a point where they needed, like, anytime that he was in a movie and they needed someone for his to play his mother, he would tell them, "Just get Beulah. She is my mother. Just get Beulah Bondi. She will do it." And yeah, they would get Beulah Bondi.
That's so funny. Yeah, there was that's so funny. I didn't even realize that. I haven't seen, like, all of Jimmy Stewart's, filmography. I'm still, like, picking through a lot of it. Uh,
Oh, there's so much good stuff. I just picked up Winchester 73 on Criterion, one of my favorite westerns. Just a really beautifully shot. It's a simple plot of this man going after the gun that was stolen from him, but it's perfect. And then you've got, Rear Window, Man Who Knew Too Much. The Rope is terrific.
I've
Yeah,
seen both Hitchcock ones that he's been in.
yeah.
Sure, and then Shop Around the Corner, Another
Shop
Christmas.
around the corner. Yeah, Harvey. Just there's so much good stuff.
He's tremendous. Sorry, so this film was shot on, in Culver City. RKO Pictures was the production company
Hmm.
for it, which is no longer they had quite the advancement with, like, technical shooting for this one. It was the first time they had sort of successfully done snow on film.
That's right. Yeah, this was so a lot of people make the big mistake that they used asbestos for the snow, and it wasn't asbestos at all. It was this special concoction of like soap and this fire extinguisher material and a couple of other things to give it this. The problem was a lot of the material that they had to do snow in movies was loud. When it would fall, the camera would pick up the sound of it like hitting the ground. It was heavy. It didn't crunch the right way. Like it didn't feel like snow. If you watch Meet Me in St. Louis, the winter scene, it really pops in 4K. You can tell that's clearly like plaster Paris that they're making the snowmen out of. Like none of that snow looks legitimate. But this was as close to real snow as you were going to get, and it was their effects supervisor who did it all. Similar to Wizard of Oz, several years earlier, that was gypsum that they used, not asbestos. But yeah, this was a special concoction that they made up.
Yeah, The Wizard of Oz has a lot of, like, very untrue lore that
Yep.
surrounds production.
Yeah, these rumors persist for years and years. They build up as like these urban legends, and they just keep circulating over and over again. And then it's people like me or Tori at the Oz Vlog who does a lot of the debunking on the Wizard of Oz stuff that have to step in and be like, no, the Munchkin didn't hang himself. It was a crane that they had on set that was knocking stuff over in the back. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and then it never gets talked about, like, the actual horrible things they did, like, give Judy her pep pills and Victor Fleming slapping her legitimately.
yeah.
You know how directors do.
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, they weren't all terrible, but they were guys and they were running the show, and unfortunately, that was yeah. I think the producers were worse. I think like the O'Selznicks and the Wallaces, and they were the ones that were pumping her full of pep pills and caffeine and all that stuff, and just keeping her thin and this and that, and then that's why you get stuff like Summer Stock, where they end up having to film it, in 2 different times. Like there were months in between, and you can tell actually the Judy Garland's weight fluctuation in different parts of the movie, where she was on stuff and when she was off stuff. And by the end of that movie, MGM had it with her. I think they tried one more time to put her in something, and she was just too far gone. So she was fired. She was dropped from MGM. She waits a couple of years. She does like radio shows and she does some stage work, and then she comes back in 1954 and does A Star Is Born, and that puts her back on the map. But that's for a different episode.
Yeah, there's no way I'll touch the 1954, Star is Born without having you on it.
Oh yeah, no, that is for me. That is the definitive version of that movie. There is no other version of that movie. I'm sorry, as much as I like Frederick March. Yeah, that's it.
I love it, and you'll die on that hill in any TikTok comment.
Hmm.
Judy or Star is Born gets brought up. If you beat me to liking it, I'm like, I'm waiting. I'm like, oh, there it is.
Yep, and she deserved the Oscar over Grace Kelly every time.
Oh, it's okay. I have many of those hills that I want to die on. Brokeback Mountain instead of Crash is that for me.
Yes. Yep.
Or anything above Zoe Saldana this year for
Ugh.
Ariana Grande as my Judy for for that one.
Yeah, that movie never should have been nominated for anything.
No. So this film, surprising based on like where we look at it culturally now as like this kind of is just synonymous with Christmas in general. Initially was kind of a critical and box office failure, only making $3.3 million on a $3.18 million budget, which with marketing fees and stuff is like an absolutely massive loss.
Yeah, that this film was my ears are like my glasses are killing me on my ears here. This film was a bomb, really, and it happened because it was unfortunately far too sentimental after the end of World War II. People did not want this kind of, sappy pablum. They wanted, best years of our lives. They wanted, a more realistic look at post-war life, and this was just sort of too drippy and saccharine. And so people didn't really like it. Critics panned it, for I wouldn't say everyone panned it, but it got mixed reviews. It just didn't land the way they wanted it to, which is I think part of the reason it's copyright lapse. It's just it fell out of public consciousness very quickly. People forgot about it, and then it wasn't until it started getting shown on television year after year that people picked up on it and realized just how beautiful it really is.
It has a very Spielberg quality to it to me.
Hmm.
That like the I feel that's like the only person where I'm like, if they had to do a modern direction of it, I do feel safe with I would feel safe in Spielberg's hands with that.
That's
Like they tell that Capra inspired Spielberg for sure.
That's a very good point, and I think that speaks to a lot of Spielberg. There's a lot of idealism in Spielberg's work. I think that's why, like, Temple of Doom was so poorly received when it came out, is because Raiders and then Last Crusade are very sort of hopeful, not almost I mean, they're lighthearted, in the grand scheme of things, it's an adventure movie. It's not as dark and depressing as, a bunch of kids are enslaved and, sent to the mines, it's very tongue in cheek and happy, and there's also that father-son element, and that's rife throughout this film. You've got George and his father, you've got George and his kids at the end there. There's a lot of like the son becomes the father and the father becomes the son, to quote Superman the movie. It's it's a very generational film. Yeah, I think that speaks right into Spielberg's wheelhouse.
Yeah, I think you can I've definitely saw like as I've since I've started this podcast and just learning more about film and stuff, like watching that, I was like, "Oh, I can totally see some of the movies that he must have watched as a kid to sort of connect the dots on his own way of filmmaking." And I without ever meeting him, I bet this was one of them, or at
Oh,
least other Capra films for sure.
definitely. That and it's interesting about Capra because I've seen several videos now on TikTok of people saying, It's a Wonderful Life, a socialist commentary. And yes, it is. Looking back on it with a more modern lens, it definitely has a socialist or even communist bent to it. I don't put that on Capra so much, even though he did end up writing quite a bit of the final script. Capra was a Republican. He was a staunch Republican. He was anti-FDR. He was kind of pro-Nazi. He very much favored Mussolini and Franco early in the war. He did go off to World War II and shot a bunch of propaganda films for the United States. There's a great documentary on it. I think it's still on Netflix. It's based on a book called, I think, Five Came Back, and it's about all the directors who went overseas to do war propaganda films and just like document the war. But he, above all else, seemed to be, even though he funded anti-reproductive rights and like a lot of really gross stuff in his work or in his personal life, his work reflects a guy who clearly like came up from nothing and just believed that the everyman could do it if he just put his mind to it. That's a lot of his stuff is, Joe America pulling himself up by his bootstraps and beating the system at its own game. You see it in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. We see it here. He's very big on the underdog and just like anti-corruption. And I think that's really what it is. We have a very different view of Republican versus Democrat in the US today versus even 20 years ago. But you go back to the 90s and it's a different ballgame entirely. And it wasn't so tribal as it is today. He really just like hated to see people, everyday people like he was and his parents and his family. He came from Italy. He's an immigrant. He literally worked his way up from like odd jobs around, his college town to, becoming a director. Um, he just hated seeing people get stepped on. and that's really where a lot of his characters come from. They don't you notice, like, there is no political affiliation in any of this film. George never says, you know, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat or any of this. What we do see, though, is we see a lot of, like, toxically male tropes that fall under or that George ends up sort of personifying. We see, you know, he never lets his feelings out gradually. It's never like, I feel bad about this, or I feel sad that I can't go off and travel the world, or we can't go on our honeymoon. It's he stews and stews and then he lashes out at really inopportune times, like, you know, at the end of the movie, right before he has the vision of what it would be like if he was never born, where he yells at his kids. There's the scene at the bar where he punches the guy out, or he gets punched. And the scene where he catches up with Mary after she comes back to town, and Sam Wainwright's on the phone, and he's like yelling at her, and like gets really dickish around her, and then he kisses her, and you know, okay, everything works out, but like he never talks about anything with anyone. He just like has these really bad outbursts, and it's okay because it's George Bailey, and in the end, he's a good guy. But like that stoicism bottles up at a certain point, and the pressure builds, and then you get those outbursts.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. It it's funny too, like, you're talking about the political, like, associations, like, Jimmy Stewart was also,
Hmm.
like, a staunch Republican,
Oh
and,
yeah,
like, read Jane Fonda's book, and she talks about it too, because her father his best friend was, like, a pretty hardcore Democrat, and, of course, she then even more so.
yeah.
But, like, two people could be best friends on opposite sides of the political spectrum before we had all this, like, identity politics wrapped into it.
Oh, I mean, look at John Wayne and Gary Cooper. I mean, they were both Republican, but John Wayne was so far to the right. And after Cooper had starred in High Noon and he won the Oscar, you know, John Wayne got up there and accepted the trophy on his behalf. You know, what's funny is he says, you know, I got to talk to my agent about how he got this film and I didn't. John Wayne had passed on it because he read the script and he realized that what was written was clearly anti Red Scare
Mhm.
propaganda, and he didn't want any part of it. So yeah, I mean, there were a lot of Republicans in Hollywood. Ronald Reagan. I mean, come on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not exactly an A-list actor, but
No, not at all, and not an A-list politician either.
no, no. So this film currently holds 94% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 4.4 on Letterboxd. I gave it a perfect 5. I'm assuming
It's a five
you
star.
also. Yeah. For Academy Awards, it was nominated and lost in all the major categories for the most part. They lost Best Picture to The Best Years of Our Lives, Best Director to The Best Years of Our Lives for William Wyler. It lost Best Actor to Frederick March for The Best Years of Our Lives, Best Editing, Best Years of Our Lives, Best Sound to The Jolson Story, but it did win a Technical Achievement Oscar for simulating snow on camera.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Best Years of Our Lives won that year. I mean, it look, Best Years of Our Lives is a beautiful film. It is an absolutely gorgeous film. It's a touching film. It's a kind of a difficult watch. It's you know, it's about people coming back from war and trying to get back into their lives. I was actually just watching The Roaring Twenties, the Jimmy Cagney film, and that's sort of the same kind of thing, but you know, on a more action oriented bent. You know, he comes back from World War One and is trying to get a job and get back into the world, and is basically turned away everywhere until he gets into bootlegging. But yeah, I mean, that's what people wanted to see. They wanted to see the realities of what had just happened and how it affected people. And this, unfortunately, just did not sit with them the way I think Capper had really hoped.
Yeah, I mean, it would be an interesting time for film, I would think, after coming back from just like the entire world having gone through this like complete trauma of just and being unable to sort of see anything more idealized. And I think we're seeing that shift in a lot of films right now, shifting back into sort of like moodier films, darker films, exploring some of that stuff now, given,
Yeah.
we're.
And this gets dark. I mean, that the whole lead up to the him having the vision with Clarence and seeing what life would have been like without him there. You know, he's sitting at the bar and he's having that monologue of like, if you're, you know, God, if you're there, if you can hear me, help me get through this. And you know, that's Jimmy Stewart working through his PTSD on camera. Like he was thinking back to what he had gone through during the war and everything he had seen, and those tears coming down his face are real tears. It's a very powerful scene. It's sort of like watching the La Marseillaise scene in Casablanca and all the refugees from Europe singing the anthem. It's the same kind of vibe. It's a very what's the term for it, for it's cinema verite almost.
Hmm.
You know, of real life on screen without it meaning to be.
Yeah, yeah, it's Yes, it's such a like, it hits so hard, and I think there's like, at least reflected back to where we are now in society, I think there's so many people that kind of feel trapped in that very similar way where, and I feel like millennials were sort of kind of sold this, like, lie of, like, you work hard and you can achieve anything and go for your dreams and whatever, and then you try and do that, and nobody kind of warned you of all these little things in life that kind of get in the way. And you can like, if for me, watching this now is, I'm sitting in a career that isn't necessarily what I want to do, and all these things, and I just saw so much of, like, where I can be at in life, like, reflected back at me at that moment where you're like, whoa, like, the reality of having to sit in your, like, I don't know, and you're like in your 30s, your 40s with, like, sort of the reality that I might not actually get to do my dream, and, like, sitting in that is it was hard, it was really
Yeah.
hard to watch.
I know that feeling. I have that feeling right now. My dream for years has been to open my own bookstore. I've always wanted to. I'm an author. I love to read. I have books all over the place. You can't see them, but they're all over here. I've always wanted to own my own bookstore, to own my own business. My parents owned a music store and studio for 10 years, over 10 years. And it was my dad's and my mom's, and they ran it. They did their own thing. It was, there are definitely limitations of, like, you don't have the freedom you used to have, to take time off and do that kind of stuff. You might make less than you would in a corporate job, but at the same time, it's yours. You don't answer to anyone. You don't have to do a yearly review every December or whatever, which I just absolutely hate. I don't know if I'm ever going to get that chance. They could walk into a bank back in 2003 and say, "We'd like to open a store. Here's our business plan." And the bank says, "All right, here you go." And now with the various crashes and just everything going on, banks aren't lending money the way they used to. You've got to GoFundMe this or Indiegogo or Kickstart or whatever. Like, you can't just launch a business with help from the bank or the government. Like, you need to crowdfund. You need communism to
Yeah.
help fund your idea. And that's what I feel like. We've got, between floods we've had and stuff, I've got debt, I've got student loans, I've got, just stuff to pay off. And I'm like, if I ever get the chance to pay all this off, then that's where my money I want to put it towards, is to open my own store. But I don't know if I'll ever get that chance. I'm going to be stuck in a desk job the rest of my life.
Yeah, I feel very similarly. Like, I live in a very small town that is very separated from any arts, even kind of remotely. I think there is, like, a theater, but it's, like, very, like, you have to be part of that production. Like, it's like a very, very separated from the arts. And my dream was
Hmm.
always sort of it was to be an actor, and I'm like, I have to move so far away to do that. And I've got a kind of kid, and, like, I'm super happy. Like, that's all great. But that is something that I sit with all the time.
Oh yeah. I will say you're in a slightly better position to me, because the one thing I always have to consider, no matter what I do career wise, is health insurance. And I have to make sure that I have good health insurance, and that, I'm not on some terrible plan or whatever. You're in Canada, and you're okay. Like, and I feel like that's, not to get too political on this, but I feel like that's, in America, that is how they get their hold on you, is they know that if you want health insurance, you need to get a good job, and the state is not going, or the country is not going to take care of you the way it should take care of its people. And to get back to the era of this film,
Mhm.
they didn't have a generation behind or ahead of them pulling the ladder up behind them. That's
No,
that you and I
that's what we
have
had.
had to deal with as millennials of different eras. We've had the boomer generation pulling up the ladder behind them, and we don't get the New Deal. We don't get the GI Bill or whatever. There's no plan to help us get off our, to get our feet off the ground, kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting. Right now, Canada's in a weird because we like to follow you guys. We don't have our own thing going on. Uh,
I know there's no, like, daily turmoil or agony or just like, what the f.
there is in a different kind of way. It's not quite Trump, but we have a province called Alberta, and their leader, Danielle Smith, spent some time at Mar-a-Lago.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, she's great. She's her big focus right now is making sure that trans kids can't play sports in school. That's her big crusade. She's also tried to get the schools to ban a bunch of books, including The Color Purple and Handmaid's Tale.
Of course.
She's horrendous.
Yeah.
We have something called a notwithstanding clause. So the teachers union in Alberta tried to strike. She used a notwithstanding clause to force them back to work. Because essentially we have this weird clause in our country where the government at any time can waive the Constitution or our Charter of Rights and Freedoms if they feel like it. So she used that. And then we have Pierre Polyev, who's our like conservative guy. And then her, and their privatized healthcare advertise that like, well, you won't have to wait as long if there's privatized options, blah, blah, blah. But what that means is if you have money, care faster, you don't have to wait with these poor people. Like, because I've grown up only in public healthcare. Like my attack that healthcare is like a human right is like so deep within my core. The only one
Yeah,
thing I care about is what do I need to do to make sure you get better? And I don't
right.
care what it costs.
I don't know why we have strayed so far from just like the basic tenets of decency. Everything when we had our governor election like last month, or no, earlier this month. Sorry, it's November. The Republican candidate, his big thing was we're going to privatize your infrastructure, your water, your electric, all that stuff as much as we can. Oh no, not just privatize it. Sorry, because we are pretty privatized in terms of what we can pick. He was going to sell it to private equity. He wanted private equity to own everything. And as we've seen from literally every chain, every store, every brand that has been bought by private equity, that always ends in failure. It always ends in closing up shop and taking away opportunities and resources from the people who need them. It's just this is where their mind is. It's about how fast can I make the most amount of money, as humanly possible, and everyone else be damned.
Yeah, it's insane. Although I have to admit, I do watch because like our news is also a ton about your guys' news. I don't think I've ever been so happy for anyone to get elected besides my own country leader as I was for Zoran Mamdani. I
Yep.
was like, that's my mayor.
I feel the same way, and I don't live in New York. I commute into New York several times a week, but I don't live in New York. But I wish I could have voted for him because I was so happy when he won, and he it was a landslide. Everyone was saying, "Oh, it's going to be so close. It's going to be like within just a percentage point or two." And you saw the results. It was clearly no one wanted Cuomo, no one wanted Sliwa. It was all Mamdani. It was great. And then same thing in Jersey. We had Mikey Sherrill up against Jack Chitterelli, and it was the same thing. Oh, Mikey's going to lose. She doesn't have charisma. She doesn't have this or that. He lost spectacularly. It was so good to watch Cheryl take it home.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Zoran Mamdani and then watching Gavin Newsom troll Trump on TikTok.
Hmm.
It's like I love to watch. He also seems super unhinged. Like I like when they call him political Patrick Bateman because you're like, that's exactly who you look like. But
Yeah.
I love watching him troll Trump. We've gotten very off topic.
We have.
We'll go back. But yeah, I think it all ties together though. Like this film is very much like and like when people are under such economic strains, things like suicide become like more like I'll put in quotations reasonable for people. Because if you're crushing student debt that you can't get out of, that you signed up for at 18 and now you're 30 and you have 3 kids because you were told that you needed to have kids and you're married and buy a house because the only way that you can get ahead is with property and then you
Right.
lose your job or lose your health insurance. Like, what are you supposed to do?
Right. They say you're supposed to have kids, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, go to college, get a good job and all this. You do all that and then you wind up in massive debt and then there's no safety net to help you when you fall on hard times. And it's interesting to me because what George goes through in this film with losing the money, he's going to go to jail, he's contemplating suicide. It's the same thing that happened in 29 with the stock market crash. People lost their fortunes, they lost their livelihoods, and the first thing they thought of was, I'm jumping out this window. And the other thing that happened, and the reason we had the Red Scare in the first place, is they turned to communism because they saw that the banks weren't going to help them. The banks were the reason everything was bad. The rich and the powerful were the reason everything was terrible. That's why they had bread lines, but they were still fine. They still had their caviar dinners and whatnot. And we see the same thing here in this film, which is why, in the 40s, early 50s, this gets investigated by the FBI for communist propaganda. They start looking at Albert Hackett and his wife, Frances Goodrich, who we mentioned earlier, because they had brushes with communist people and and you've got Odets and Trumbo and all of them. So like, yes, there is a socialist angle to this film, but there's a reason for it. And it's, because how else do you explain? Like, no one's going to sit there and root for Potter. No one's going to sit there and say, you know what? I should have sold to Potter and I'm going to, become a capitalist now. The end. Everyone wins and goes home happy. No, that's not how it works.
Yeah, completely. The People have been so convinced that, like, there's that scene, I mean, we'll get to it later too, where Potter's offering 50 cents on the dollar for all of their shares, and all of the people are so grateful and so like, "Oh, thank God, like, he's gonna help
Right.
us." And George explains, "He's not helping you. He's not he's not buying, he's selling."
Exactly, and he's exploiting you and your fear, and he's giving you less than what you deserve because he knows you need the money, and you're in a really bad spot. And that's it's another interesting piece about how this ties into Capra's belief about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, because George uses his own money, his honeymoon money, to make sure everyone else can not just like exist for the next couple of weeks until the banks reopen, but also so he can keep his business afloat and keep them from going elsewhere and selling to Potter. It's his money and Mary's money that they use. It's not a grant, it's not a loan, it's not, and it is their livelihood that they are putting on the line to keep things going. And it's again that American individualism that I did this myself and I kept it going despite what the system tried to keep me down.
That's like the fundamental flaw, I think, with like, and I'm going to put like Republican as like, I'm not going to go like not MAGA, but like Republican or conservative ideals in general is like their through line of thought is if we tax people less and we give the money back to the communities, well, the communities will support themselves within each other. They'll help each other out. But that's just not the way the human brain works. People want to collect, like hoard all the money themselves, or they're panicked about what's going to happen to them. And then the system I just feel like there aren't enough George Baileys in the world to then have your community depend on, and then your George Bailey's bailing everybody out, everybody out to the point where he's suicidal. Like that's the
Right.
problem. Like there needs to be a system to buffer that it can't be depending on those people that are willing to pour every last dollar out of themselves.
Yeah, we see this a lot right now with ICE invading these communities, and we see people rallying together, and not just to fight off ICE, but to help each other and hide the people who are being persecuted here, to provide them with food and clothing and shelter and all this stuff. And they hate that. They hate seeing the community rally together because then it shows them, well, they don't need us. They don't need the banks. They don't need capitalism. They can do it themselves. We see this with Cuba too. Everyone says, if you love communism so much, go live in Cuba. Cuba's not the way it is because of Cuba. Cuba's the way it is because of America. America cut off ties with Cuba, cut off trade, cut off everything. They did sanctions, all this stuff. And so when for that brief time when Obama was president and they opened up Cuba for tourism, you could see, people are driving 50-year-old cars that they've been maintaining for the last 50 years because that's all they had. They couldn't get new cars from Toyota or Honda or whatever. They're driving old 57 Bel Airs and Edsels and these cars from the 50s and the 40s and they learned how to take care of them and keep them running. Cuba had like 6 COVID vaccines created before we got one off the ground. Their literacy rate is 95%. And I know it sounds like I'm singing Cuba's praises, but like they figured it out because they didn't have capitalism weighing them down. And there are a lot of terrible things that happened to Cuba and a lot of dictatorial things that are not good, but there's also a lot of good stuff that came out of not having the banks breathing down our necks every 2 seconds.
Yeah, they also have public health care, and I think they
Yeah.
put free secondary education as well.
Yep. There's a lot of good stuff that happens when the state or the government or just each other, when we take care of each other, great things happen, but capitalists will not allow it.
Absolutely not. So the film started, just in case anybody isn't familiar with the film, some spoilers for, a 1944 film. So the movie starts off with and I love this shot. We see sort of it's just shot of space essentially, and it looks like kind of stars almost blinking and talking to each other. But it's a divine intervention from guardian angel and God and Joseph about a man down on Earth named George Bailey, who is contemplating killing himself. They select Clarence, who is his guardian angel, who is trying to prove himself to get his wings, but he hasn't had much luck yet. And essentially, they tell him if he helps George Bailey not throw away his life, he will be rewarded his wings. And then they start the movie by playing through George's entire life.
Yeah,
So
it's a fascinating way to tell a story because the entire film is exposition. The entire film leading up until the climax of the film, the seeing what it would have been like if he had never been born. The entire film is just expository. Like here's how we got to this point.
mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. Like when I watched it with my husband for the first time, he's like, "Where is this going?" Like I just He's like, "Are we gonna watch this man's entire life story and then watch it again?" I'm like, "Mhm, that's exactly what we're gonna do."
And it's funny because it's the same kind of thing that I think with Meet Me in St. Louis, which is, yes, it's a Christmas film, but only for like the last 20 minutes of the movie. It is not a Christmas film for most of the film. And it's kind of funny when, well, Die Hard isn't a Christmas film. Die Hard takes place on Christmas Eve. It is a Christmas party that he is at. He's only in Nakatomi Plaza because of Christmas. And then he writes, "Ho, ho, ho, I've got a machine gun and blood" on the guy's shirt. Like, it's Christmas all the way through. This is Christmas for the last 20 minutes of the film.
Yeah, and it's not even central to the plot, like, it could have been any other type of time of year, essentially.
Right, exactly. But it
Like, it
it hits
yeah,
harder because it's Christmas.
yeah, it could have been a bell on someone's door or whatever, like, it didn't have to be the Christmas bell.
Yeah, fun fact about the opening of this film, that I learned from reading this is that there were alternate versions of the opening. One in which, it's Ben Franklin in his office in heaven who is talking to the other angels about this guy George Bailey. And then there's in Clifford Odets's original script, he wrote, that so little Zuzu Bailey wanders into a music conservatory, which turns out to be in heaven. Her grandfather, George's dead father, is interrupted from harp practice by her appearance, and then she explains that Daddy's in great peril and that they need to help. And so it's kind of interesting. Capra is the one who really cut that whole opening in half and made it just the cosmos, the conversation between the constellations, and then we see George.
I like the way they did it.
I do
I
too.
I don't like either of those versions you just explained. So we start with George Bailey. I believe he's like 11 or 12, and they introduce him. He's got a younger brother named Harry that he saves from drowning when ice cracks or when they're playing outside when they're kids. And from the water, which I'm not really sure how that is at all medically possible, he loses his hearing.
hmm I think he gets like pneumonia or something, and it affects his ear. Like he gets an ear infection, and it just like totally destroys the hearing. I think that's what ends up happening.
Yeah, I guess this is a pre-penicillin day in 19, I think it's 1919, they say for that one.
Yeah, it's early. Funny enough, did you ever see The Bishop's Wife, the David
Yes.
Niven movie? So the kid who plays young George Bailey, the little snot-nosed kid, plays a snot-nosed kid in that movie too. He's like the head of the bullies who throw the snowballs and have the snowball fight. And then Zuzu is the daughter of David Niven in that movie. So it's
Oh.
two Christmas movies that they're
Oh,
in.
that's funny. We then go to we jump forward a little bit in time. We go to where George works at a drugstore, and it's got my favorite thing in the whole movie. And I taught my daughter this when she was like 18 months old because I thought it was so cute. He's got this, I don't even know what it is. Is it like
Oh,
a
the
cigarette?
lighter.
It's a lighter, and he holds it and he goes, "Hot
Hot
dog." Well, I taught my she was like 18 months old. She had like no words, but she could do hot dog
hot
at
dog.
Christmas.
Yep. I wish I had $1 million. Hot dog.
So he's working there, and there's two little girls at the counter who both have a crush on him. One is a girl named Mary who confesses her love for him in his deaf ear, and another
Mhm.
one is Violet, who seems quite popular with the boys even at like 12. George is working behind the counter, and he finds a letter from to his boss, Mr. Gower, saying that his son has died. We then cut to Mr. Gower, and we see that he is completely, devastated and drunk. And this is back in a time where you could really be an alcoholic quite openly.
An alcoholic and a pharmacist. This is before we had like trained pharmacists. He's just like putting stuff in pill capsules and like unbelievable.
Crying and just yeah, it's hard. It's hard to watch. Like I can't imagine being at my job where my kid died and then I still had to do my job.
Yeah. I don't know how you keep the rat poison so close to the actual medicine. That's what I want to know.
Yeah. So in his drunken grief, he fills these pills for a kid with rat poison. George realizes what he's doing, and I love this scene. He's like holding the pills. He doesn't really want to confront his boss about it. This is also it's very like this is the part I think that does age the film quite a bit. Is like I think there's a lot more back and forth between kids and adults now. I think
hmm
a lot more kids would be comfortable saying like this is a mistake
Yeah.
in a way that kids are taught to speak up for themselves a little bit more now in the way that they definitely weren't then.
Yeah, and this when he does realize that the pills are wrong and that there's poison in them, he doesn't like hide them or anything. He runs to his dad because dad knows best. Dad is the one who will help me get out of the situation. I find that interesting that he his first instinct is, I need to go to my father, and they have that close enough relationship.
Yeah, it's fair that relationship through the whole movie is so sweet. Um, and when he does run to his father, this is when we're introduced to the antagonist of the film, Mr. Potter, that we've been talking all about, who owns essentially half the town and is trying to get a hold of George's father's building and loan, which is essentially a somewhat failing business, but it is helping the people in the community buy
Yeah.
houses.
Do you notice Potter never ages this entire movie? He is the same person the entire 2.5 hours. It's so funny.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's like, Steve Martin has not he has been kinda old my
Right.
entire life.
Yep. I remember seeing him in an early role, like in the 70s, or like the maybe the yeah, like early 70s, where he had dark hair, and then just one day he turned gray, and he's been old ever since.
Yeah, he has looked to say it's been yeah, father of the bride, only murders in the building, the same.
It's the
So,
same. Yep.
Potter just must be doing whatever, Steve Martin's doing. And we are introduced and basically he's criticizing George's father and George is, pretty quick to defend his dad and, gives Potter even a little shove, which I thought was to push a man in a wheelchair, it seems.
Hey, it's if he's the representation of capitalism, go shove him as much as you want.
That's fair. That's super fair. George, his father can't talk to him. He goes back to the drugstore and ends up confronting Mr. Gower, who receives a phone call that the medication hasn't been delivered. And this is a hard watch too, where Mr. Gower kind of takes out all of his frustration about his son dying onto George.
Yeah, and like, what do you call it? Boxes him on the ears. Yeah, it's not easy. Clearly, like, of a different era.
Yeah, it's a very hard watch. And then George sort of is able to somewhat get it out, and then Mr. Gower realizes what he's done by licking the poison, which I
I
thought
saw I was like, have you just like built up a tolerance at this point? Are you doing this a lot?
that you're like, rat poison, whatever
Can
else.
you tell the difference between medicine and rat poison? Are your taste buds that sensitive?
Yeah, or like, could you not smell it? Like, I just feel like maybe putting poison in your mouth is
Right.
not solid plan. And so the Mr. Gower like sort of hugs George, and George promises he'll never tell anybody. And then we cut to a scene where George is, I believe he's grown up now, and just his brother Harry is just graduating from high school, and it's now George's turn to go off on his adventure
Yep.
before he goes to college. He's been working for his dad for I think I don't know if it's 2 or 4 years. I was looking at it how much time it had been, because they say college, but then they keep saying 4 years. So, um, that's not important. And Mr. Gower has bought him this, suitcase, and we see George is now full of adventure. He's very excited about being able to go off and do this for himself. He's been wanting to get out of this small town since he was 12. There's that scene with him talking to Mary about he's gonna grow up and he's gonna go all over the world and he's gonna have 3 harems and 6 wives.
Mhm.
We then go to a scene where they're gonna go off to the graduation dinner, and they've all been sort of drinking and sitting around, and his father almost is kind of trying to talk him into staying at the building and loan. "Do
Yeah.
you sure you wanna do this?" And I just again, that's, like, part of why I think it's really timeless, and I think, like, a lot of people, their parents have an idea of what they want them to do, and when you're like, "I don't wanna do this. I gotta go."
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can. I get the feeling like the father clearly wants him to stay, and not just I think to run the building alone, but like he's gonna miss him, and they have that bond. But yeah, there's that belief like you're the prodigal son. You're supposed to take over the family business and keep it going. I think as he sees the writing on the wall that he's not going to be around forever, and if he goes, that's pretty much it. The building alone is done, and Potter wins.
Yeah, because there's also Uncle Billy, who we haven't super mentioned, who's, the Mr. Bailey's,
Uncle,
father, who is
brother, yeah, but it's George's uncle. Yeah,
George's uncle, unable to remember anything at all, like,
yeah.
just cannot possibly remember a thing.
But he has a pet. Was it raven? Is it a pet raven or a pet crow? It's I think it's a pet crow, and that crow has been in like a dozen movies or something. Like that bird shows up in a bunch of different movies. It's very funny.
I was reading a little bit about that. They're super smart, like
Oh yeah.
Raven, so smart. They think they're much smarter than primates. They just can't prove it because they don't have thumbs, so they can't give them, like, little problems to work out.
Oh yeah. No, they remember people. if you're kind to them, if you leave them gifts and you're nice to them, they will return the favor and bring things to you and drop little trinkets and stuff. I remember seeing a woman who had fed the birds in her area and the crows and stuff, older woman, she had fallen in her driveway, and the crows descended upon her and surrounded her and were cawing loudly to try and get attention so that someone would come and help her. It was unbelievable.
That's incredible. Always be nice to crows.
That's right. Yeah. No, oh, don't piss off the crows. No, you'll live to regret it.
We then George is sort of talked into by his brother coming to the kind of graduation. George just doesn't want to. He's like, I'm too old for this. At the ripe age of 21 or
I
whatever.
know. It's like still fresh out of high school.
21, but he does look 38 because that's how old Jimmy Stewart is.
Yeah.
This is where he meets Mary, the girl from the counter again, as an adult. Violet's also there, and he and her start to dance. And this is, I think, one of my favorite sequences of the film. As they're dancing, they're getting to know each other, and he's sort of seeing her as more of an adult for the first time. And her date is pretty angry, and the dance floor is over this pool.
So
And
this is the Beverly Hills High School. This is a real gymnasium. They call it the swim gym. I think swimnasium would have been a better name, but it's a real gym floor that opens up in the middle, and underneath is a swimming pool. And it's funny because a critic of the film at the time was like, "This is completely unbelievable. There's no way this place exists. This is clearly built as a set." And Capra was really pissed off. He's like, "No, we went here. We filmed here. Like this is a real place."
I love it. And they're doing the Charleston, and, they're doing, one of those, I guess, semi kind of dance marathon things where people are getting tapped out and
Yes.
whatever. And Mary and George are dancing, and the pool's opening up, and everybody else has noticed, but they haven't. And everybody's staring at them. And George says, "Well, everybody's looking. We must be good."
He starts doing that Charlie Chaplin thing where he like gets really close to the edge and then he comes all the way back. And everyone's like, "Whoa."
And they end up falling in the pool. And then people start jumping in, including the principal.
Mm-hmm.
We then cut to, I think, probably the most famous part of the film, other than the bell ringing part, is Mary and George walking. He's walking her home, and they're in sort of like a bathrobe, and he's in some like old football gear that they've kind of swiped from the school. And he asks her what she wants, and he said, "Do you want the moon? I'll lasso you the moon." And they're having this conversation, and they're kind of falling in love.
Yeah. Real quick, I just want to go back to the swim gym scene.
Yeah.
Do you know who the kid is who opens it up? The one who's like really upset that he and Mary are dancing together?
I was trying to figure it out because his voice sounded so familiar.
That's Carl Switzer, who is Alfalfa in The Little Rascals, but he's
Oh,
also his picture shows up in White Christmas. He is the Haynes sisters' brother from the military, the dog face boy.
oh,
That's Carl Switzer that they use in that photograph.
okay. Yeah, I knew I had seen him before, but I didn't really deep dive it. The dad also looked really familiar to me, but then I looked, he had like 200 and something credits, and I was like, I don't have time for this right now.
Oh yeah, no, he's typical character actor who just like popped up and everything. But no, Carl Switzer had a rough life after The Little Rascals, but he showed up every once in a while in various roles, and this is one of them where he pops up as the bully kid who opens up the pool.
Oh, child stars, a tale as old as time.
Yep.
So George and Mary are having this conversation, and they're kind of falling in love. And then there's a very funny scene where George accidentally kind of steps on the tail of her house coat, and she jumps into the bush because she's not
Hmm.
wearing anything. And he's got the robe, and she's like, "Give me the robe." And he's sort of saying like, "Oh no, like you gotta come out for it." And she's like, "I'm gonna tell your mother." And he's like, "Well, my mother's way down the block."
It's such an iconic scene now, that whole thing with singing what is it, Buffalo Gals, as they're
Yeah.
coming down the street, and he's got the football tunic on and
Yeah.
everything. It's so perfect.
And it's so sweet. And I think anybody who's fallen in love in that like early part when you're like, I don't know, it's so silly, and you think everything they say is just like incredible. I don't know. It really reminded me of that, and you really get that like feeling from them of that, like those like early moments of falling in love.
Hmm. Yeah, even the guy across the street who's screaming at him, "Kiss her already!" And he's
Yeah.
like, basically like, "Ah, youth is wasted on the young."
Yeah. And and as they're sort of Mary's, naked in the bush when George is sort of has the robe in his hand, they just drive up, and he finds out that his father suffered a stroke.
Yeah,
And so he says, "Mary, I gotta go," puts the robe on the bush
he
for
hangs it
her,
on the bush. Yeah.
and they drive off. And then we cut to the scene where George is had to this is his first sort of big thing he's had to let go. He's had to sacrifice his trip to Europe and his trip to the Middle East in order to stay and help with his father's affairs now that it's all sort of wrapping up
Yeah.
after his death. And we get a scene where it's the board of directors that Potter's been appointed to now, and he's wanting to close the building and loan and sort of absorb it, basically saying that there's business is useless and it's just a waste of money.
Hmm.
And George gets to a point where Potter sort of pushes him and he's saying like, this isn't like a worthless business. Like my father was not a businessman, but this is important. This institution's important
Right.
to keep people out of these, houses that are essentially what he calls slums.
Yeah, it's funny. I have as part of this book, I have the entire script. And I remember thumbing through it and seeing that monologue. Yeah, just a minute, just a minute. Now hold on, Mr. Potter. You're right when you say my father was no businessman. I know that. Yeah, they. Oh, was it? What did you say a minute? They had to wait and save their money before they even ought to think of a decent home until their children grow up and leave them. Until they're so old and broken down that they. Do you know how long it takes a working man to save $5,000? Just remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much? Is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Like, it's so funny to think that those words probably came in part from the same guy who was saying, Reagan, Reagan was right, and HUAC was right, and Republicanism is right, and like this is like socialist 101.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy. Like, we're looking down the barrel of this being almost 100 years ago, and you're
Yeah.
like, why is this still a fucking problem?
Right.
Like,
We're still having these same conversations, and there are still people who will watch this movie, or probably not watch this movie, but like who will hear this and defend that the banks are right, that no one is entitled to have a home or entitled to have food or anything. And it's like, what happened to your conscience? Did it just like kill itself?
yeah, my favorite thing I think I've seen lately is like when people say they're like Sesame Street didn't go woke, Disney didn't go woke, you just grew up, didn't learn the messages, and are an asshole.
Right. Yeah. You just grew up and became a shitty person. That's what happened.
Yeah, it's crazy. You're like, how are we still having these conversations? I'm like, there's so much of that too, and I think there's like the character that we'll get to here in a little bit that I think illustrates it so well is like George is willing to reach out to like the like immigrants and stuff in his community as well, that they are
Yeah.
like completely dismissed. Like Martini is not able to get a loan through the bank despite being a business owner. He's not able to get a house from anybody but
Right.
George. And we see so much of that now where they're like, oh, these immigrants. And you're like, you're so white to be saying that.
And he's a business owner. He owns the bar.
Yeah.
He is a contributing member of society. He's serving the community, literally serving the community, and he can't get a home from the bank because of who he is.
It's crazy. And it's the same thing now. Like it just is, it's absolutely wild. You're like, why are we've just shifted who we've decided to dislike a little bit, but
Yeah,
like the same, the same crap that the Latin community is getting, the Irish and the Italians got at this time period.
exactly.
So then Mr. Potter essentially says, well, if we want to keep this open, you have to run it. And so George then gives his college money to his brother. And this is in the second big loss of what he wants. I think then this is where we jump forward in time again, I think. Another
Yeah,
40.
we skip ahead. Harry comes home from college, and George is expecting him to take over. Like, I've held down the fort long enough. It's your turn to run the building and loan, so I can go to college and have my life. Yeah, and then Harry comes home and he announces that he's married. It's like, great. Now I'm stuck here still.
Do you have younger siblings? That's such
I
younger
do.
sibling energy. Is it
Oh yeah.
not? To be like,
Yep.
well, you've always taken care of it, so continue doing that. Thank you.
I was sort of forced to be independent. They didn't kick me out of the house, but at 16, my mom was like, get your own cell phone bill, go get a job, go do this, go do that. My brother was like everything handed to him. And he wanted a new video game system. He wanted this. He wanted $20 to go see a movie with his friends. They would just give it. So my parents will deny it. My mother especially will deny it up and down. But no, that's how it happened. And then she wonders, like, you were rushing to get out of the house. Basically pushed me out. You forced me to be an adult sooner than I kind of wanted to be. So yeah, no, this is I see a lot of similarities between George and me.
So he comes back, he's married, and then Mary is or his mother and him have this funny little scene where she's like, you know, "Your brother's back, but so's that girl Mary. You should see what she's up to." And he's, kind of brushes her off or whatever. And then they have a kiss on the mouth, which I'm like, "Wow, times have changed."
Yeah. There's a great SNL sketch with Paul Rudd where he brings his girlfriend home for the first time to meet his parents, and it turns out they're a kissing family, and like he's kissing everyone, like his mom, his dad, everyone on the mouth, and like in really just creepy way. It's so funny.
I haven't seen that, but I'll definitely YouTube that after this.
It's an older sketch from like I think like 10 or 12 years ago, but yeah, it's very fun. But it reminded me of that.
My husband was horrified. He's like, "That's his mom." I'm like,
Hmm.
different times, different times. And that's not his real mom. You need to remember that this is a movie.
Right, exactly.
And so George, after saying he's not going to go see Mary, kind of is outside of her house walking back and forth. And she kind of calls out her window asking if he's picketing.
Yeah, it's a great line.
And this is the scene you and I were talking about where he's so angry about what's happening that he's just like taking this out on Mary when he's trying to talk to her, and she's got this picture she drew for him and she's so excited to see him, and you can see that she just like lights up when he's around and he's so awful to her.
Yeah, he is not nice to her a lot. Like when we first meet them at this point, and this is what I was talking about earlier, where he doesn't let his feelings out in a normal way. He just bottles it up until it explodes. This George Bailey is an interesting character because a lot of times when we hear about writing characters that are interesting or that you want to that you identify with or just like for a good story, you want characters who push the narrative along, who take action and move things along. But he doesn't. He never does. Everything happens to him. And so by everything happening to him, the story moves along because he's rather than he being the hero of the story, he's really just like the keystone in the archway that keeps everything from falling down. And that is his role. He is the Atlas holding the world on his shoulders to keep the world spinning. And if he's not there, then everything collapses. It's just interesting. Like it's rare to see this happen in a story and have it done well. And this is one of those moments, or this one of those movies where George is the character where it all happens to him. He has no agency of his own, but it still holds up. It still works.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he does have like a little bit of agency in terms of he seems to be like his morals will outweigh his own personal.
Yeah, he ends up making, but it, like, is a choice of doing the right thing or abandoning your family really a choice in the
Yeah,
end?
totally. He did like very much a victim of the system that he lives within.
Yeah.
Mary's boyfriend, his friend actually calls during this time and sort of offers, while he's there, offers George a job on the ground floor of developing plastic. And George kind of brushes him off. And then this is where him and Mary kiss. And then George is like yelling at her that he never wants to get married. And then we cut to their wedding day.
Yes. Yep, and then
And
and then we get into the big bank shutdown, and this where I was saying how he uses his money and their money that they were going to go on their honeymoon with to save the building and loan.
yeah. And this is like, because I was trying to figure it out. Like, this isn't an exact, it's all these things that did happen. Like we've got Black Tuesday, we've got the Depression,
Yeah.
we've got the war, but it's not quite lined up in a way where the years fully make sense.
Yeah, they play with the timelines to make the story work, but
Yeah.
I'm fine. Like I did a video recently where it was like they show a clip from The Music Man in the opening to Welcome to Derry, the new It TV show, but the story takes place in like very beginning of 1962, and the movie didn't actually come out for another 6 months, and so like that kind of stuff bothers me. But here, because of everything going on and just like the way this works, I'm okay with the timelines not matching up exactly. It all
It was
happened, it just didn't happen the way they said it did.
it was the first time I ever really noticed it, actually, was this time watching the movie where I was
Yeah.
like, I'm like, "Oh, like 29," and like, but we're saying 4 years, but like you guys didn't even enter the war until like 41, I think, right?
It was, yeah, Pearl Harbor, I think, was the big, um the
Yeah.
big catalyst for the US entering the war.
Yeah, because like I mean, we did 2 years without you. I don't wanna brag or anything.
Oh, no, you were far better people than we were. I mean, we were having Nazi rallies in Madison Square Garden for a couple of years until we finally actually got into the war. Hollywood wouldn't even make anti-Nazi films until Warner Brothers did in they did was it Confessions of a Nazi Spy, I think, was the first one, and that was like 39, 40. I mean, that was, right before we got in.
The Bugs Bunny ones are rough. Like, to
Oh
watch
yeah.
the Bugs Bunny ones about Japan are crazy.
Yeah, it's it's they're not good. They're
No.
those old war cartoons, they're racist as hell. Yeah.
I mean, I can kinda get behind Donald Duck in Naziland a little bit, but it's,
Mhm.
you're like, "Well, at least we're just making fun of Germans," but,
There's a whole canon of Donald having PTSD from the war, and like the reason he is the way he is and how angry he is because he has unresolved trauma from serving in World War II.
that's great. Donald has shell shock.
Yeah,
I mean, that's fair. He's very much like George at that last, in the last scene before, he tries to take his life when he's, like, screaming at his family as Donald in every single cartoon.
that's true, yeah.
So they've sold off the things, they've saved the building and loan, and there's this great scene where Potter says, like, "If you close your door before 6 o'clock, then you're done, you're never gonna reopen." And they've got their, like, literally last $2.
$2, yeah.
And in that scene, we didn't talk about it before, but when all the people come in to try and, um, get their money back, out of the bank, George has to explain, like, how loan investment works. But he's basically like, "I need to keep this open so that you don't have to go crawling into Potter, and he doesn't own us all, so, like, how much do you realistically need?" And so
Yeah,
then one guy wants, like, $200,
$200, yeah.
this $8,000, which is, like, a crazy amount of money in that amount of time. It's like 150 grand.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but, some of the women are like, one woman's like, "Can I have 1750 to get me to next week?"
Yep,
And they're all sort of working together. We then, afterwards, George sort of remembers Mary and that he's married, and he goes back to this, old house that I guess she has bought, or I don't know if they needed to buy, like, this old rundown house that they decide to fix
that's
up.
right. The house they were throwing the rocks at. Apparently, Donna Reed had such a good arm, she actually hit the glass on
Oh,
that house. She did it in, like, one take, she's like she hucked that rock and knocked out the glass and nailed it. Yeah.
I could never.
Neither could I. I've got a bad arm. So, no, she did the thing. It's sorta like, with Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns where she takes the whip and she's knocking the heads off the mannequins. She apparently did that in one take, that whole scene. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. I could never be like, I would need stunt doubles for stuff like that. I just have, no arm at all.
Yeah, this
Uh,
is where Bert and Ernie help them with their honeymoon, and they sort of not fix up the house, but they decorate it a little. They've got their little table with their dinner. This is before they really start renovating the house.
yeah. And then so time goes by, the building and loan continues to, like, kind of just continue to run, not really make any extra money, but not lose money. It's profitable enough that George can survive, but he isn't, they aren't able to travel, they aren't able to fix up the house beyond, like, kind of like, they have to really pick away at it. They have, like, a banister that won't, like,
The
keep.
the thing keeps falling off. Yeah, he keeps taking it off when he puts his hand on it.
Yeah. And they end up having 4 children, which is a lot after having 1. I'm like, "God, 4 seems like so many." But they do develop, like, an affordable housing subdivision called Bailey Park,
Yes.
that becomes quite a big thorn in, Mr. Potter's side. So much so that he offers George, $20,000 a year, to work for him.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. I mean, this really is just this is the biggest problem with Potter is that it's never enough for him. George Bailey in the grand scheme of things is a small fish in a very big pond. What he has is a handful of homes for these people in Bedford Falls, but it's still the fact that he has it and Potter doesn't is what pisses him off so much. And so now he tries every chance he can to try and get George to sell or to close down the building and loan because God forbid anyone else has a piece of the pie.
Well, I think that's how you got your president, to be honest,
Oh yeah,
with
absolutely.
Obama saying that, you may have all this money, but there's one thing you'll never be, and that's president like
Oh
me.
yeah.
And Donald Trump said, "Hold my beer." And now
Yep.
he's president.
My big gulp. Yeah.
There is so I love that woman from the I've Had It podcast, Jennifer Welch, who calls him President McTaco Tits. I love, yeah, But, like, yeah, I just there's so much of watching this where I was like, "This is this is like watching what's happening in the United States, but in this, like, little microcosm," and here too, like, you guys influence us so much, but watching all the people that, grow up, like, working class, like, trying to shift into you're like, "Why are you did you not pay attention to any of the movies we watched as kids?"
Right. Like, what were you watching when you were watching either this movie or Raiders of the Lost Ark? Like, who were you rooting for?
Or there was, like, a big Nazi rally in Vancouver. Yeah, and I'm like, this is BC. We're supposed to be super progressive. We are rainy California." Like,
Mhm.
that is what we are.
Yeah, I learned recently that New Jersey was the last state in the union to abolish slavery. Yeah, and then I thought about South Jersey, and I was like, now it makes sense.
Is that like the Jersey Shore, Jersey? I don't know much about your
So,
state.
yeah, I mean, the shore runs along the whole eastern seaboard, but yeah, when people talk about the shore, they talk about, like, Cape May and Wildwood, and those are south. But yeah, South Jersey is so close to, you get closer to, the Virginia area, you're going towards DC and south, just south, and that's where you see a lot of the Confederate flags. And there's a lot. Apparently, we had a very big KKK operation in New Jersey for a long time, both north and south. So, yeah, it's just not good.
I
Yeah, no, I'm looking at a map. I'm so bad at geography. It's my least favorite part of Jeopardy. But so, like, the western border of Jersey runs along PA, and you're talking southern PA, so Maryland, and then yeah, you get down towards Washington, and then Virginia, a little more southwest of that. But yeah, just that whole area is, or not that whole area, but a lot of that area gets very iffy in terms
Yeah,
of white supremacy.
scary. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like as far as like from a foreigner's perspective, I'm like, well, I could probably go to New York or California and
Yeah.
Seattle. I'm not traveling there at all right now, but at that like before, I'm like, I don't really think I'd care for anything other than these two completely opposite sides of the country.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, no, avoid the middle as much as you can.
Yeah. I don't know. It's very seems like a scary place.
Yeah, it is.
So it
So
seems for a moment here that George is gonna take Potter up until his sort of morality clicks back in.
yeah, he gives him the cigar, he offers him the money, and he goes back, and then he realizes, like, "This is not who I am."
Mhm. And then this is where World War II breaks out. Harry's brother goes off to serve. George can't because he's deaf in his one ear. Uh, Harry ends up being quite a successful pilot. They talk about how he shot down a couple of planes before they attacked, I believe, a ship, they've said.
Mm.
Wins the Congressional Medal of Honor. And this is almost where we are going to converge timelines here. It's the morning of, it's Christmas Eve in the morning. We see Uncle Billy go to the bank to deposit the money for the building and loan, which is $8,000. He accidentally leaves it in a newspaper that's picked up by Potter, who hides it. And Uncle Billy is panicked because he's got the bank examiner waiting for him back at their office. And they realize that it's not there. George sort of freaks out at Billy realizing that it's going to be like scandal, jail time for, I can't remember what they said, embezzlement or
Yeah,
something.
some kind of embezzlement or laundering or something. Yeah, there was some reason the 8,000 not being there was a legal problem.
And George will be the one who goes to prison because he is I think, the largest shareholder, they said.
Yeah.
He goes home. He chooses not to talk about this, chooses to scream at his family. His kid is just trying to practice the piano. His other kid just wants to know Frankenstein. He's mad that the doctor got called because his one kid's sick.
Right, then he yells at the teacher over the phone, and then he, like, threatens the teacher's husband. That's funny.
Yeah, Mrs. Welch.
As well, yeah. What do you think you're doing sending a kid home half naked?
Everybody's crying. George then kind of goes out and he decides that getting drunk is probably the best idea.
Yes. And this is where we see that PTSD coming through, that real emotion from him of what he was going through is this scene.
Yeah. And yeah, he's at the bar. And then immediately after he prays, Martini comes out and Nick, who's the bartender, and they're like, you need to go home. You're not okay.
Yeah.
And the teacher hears him, or not the teacher, sorry, the guy sitting next to him hears his name and realizes that that George was the guy that yelled at his wife on the phone. And so more moments after George asks for God's help, he gets punched in the face.
Yep, divine intervention.
Yeah. And then he then, decide because it's the 40s, he gets in his car as you would after being, heavily intoxicated,
Yep,
drives into a tree, gets onto a bridge, realizes that he's worth, more dead with his life insurance. Oh, it's Potter who says that to him.
that's right, yeah.
Potter tells him he's worth more dead than alive, so he decides that he's gonna kill himself too, so that his family can pay off the loan, the bankruptcy, and they don't have to deal with him anymore. And just as he's about to jump, this is where we see Clarence come down from Earth, and he jumps in
Yes.
to save George. And so George jumps in to save Clarence, and they kind of get out and they go, and there's this little scene, and I love Clarence's character so much. And they're with a guy who was kind of shining the light to help them get back in, and they're drying off, and Clarence is wearing his long sort of robe, and he said,
He's got this, like, Ebenezer Scrooge long, like, night skirt thing, night dress.
yeah, and he's like, "Thank you, my wife bought it for me. I died in it."
Yeah. This what's hilarious, did you ever see Amazon has this movie? They have the abridged version of It's a Wonderful Life.
No.
This is the scene. So if you watch the abridged version, this is the scene where, they're drying off after being rescued out of the river, and George says to Clarence, "You wouldn't happen to have an extra $8,000, would you?" And then it jumps ahead in time to George running through Bedford Falls, screaming, "Merry Christmas, everyone! Oh, it's so good to see you." So we skip the entire part of the whole point of the movie of seeing what it would be like without him there, and all it does is it looks like Clarence gave him $8,000 save his ass. It's the funniest thing. It's so terribly edited.
That's insane. But that's what, yeah, just like let's forget all of the powerful parts of this entire film.
Yeah, exactly. The whole crux of the film hinges on him having this vision of what it would have been like without him. And Amazon was like, you know what? That's not important. Let's just skip it. Let's skip ahead to the ending.
Yeah. So they end up drying off, and Clarence keeps trying to explain that he's his guardian angel, and George isn't believing him at all, even though he seems to know all these facts about him. And this is where he kind of says, like, the world would be better off if I had never been born, which has now become a cliche in a lot of things, but this is the first iteration
Yeah.
of and so Clarence says, "Okay, have it your way," and he erases George from he's erases George's life completely.
Yeah.
Um, and this is where they start to go about town and see how things are so different. He goes into Martini's bar, which isn't owned by Martini because Martini can't get a business loan or a house loan or anything. It belongs to Nick. And he's
Yeah.
trying to talk to Nick, but Nick is, this sort of hardened bartender.
Sheldon Leonard, I love one of my favorite character actors. Just a great distinct voice. Yeah. Where do you get off calling me Nick? I don't know you. Yeah, I love Sheldon Leonard.
Yeah, if you think of like a gangster from Bugs Bunny, like you think of like that kind of voice.
Yeah, he's he there I think Hank is it Hank Azaria? I think it is Hank Azaria on The Simpsons uses him for some of his voices. He does a
Oh,
Sheldon Leonard impression, and it's where we get the names Sheldon and Leonard on The Big Bang Theory.
I know that. Yeah, we see that, and then there's this scene where we see sort of a homeless man come in and start begging, and they tell him to get out of here, and George realizes it's Mr. Gower, but he can't believe because he's still doesn't believe the timeline that's happening right now. He's
Right,
doesn't believe Clarence. He's just hasn't quite come to grips with it, and he's watches them like spray Mr. Gower in the face and kick him out. And he's like, "Well, why would you do this to Mr. Gower? He's the druggist." And they're like, "No, he's been in prison for 20 years for killing a kid." This is our first iteration of like, well, George wasn't there to stop Mr. Gower from making that mistake because he was never alive.
right. And then we see the worst thing that could have happened to well, we see Bedford Falls become Potterville, and it's a slum. There's gambling establishments, and there's gentlemen's clubs and God knows what else, and it's lit up in lights and it's flashy. It looks like Vegas at its worst. But I love that the worst thing that could have ever happened to Mary is she became a single librarian. And
Yeah.
she's an old maid.
Yeah, you're not gonna like it, George. She's an old maid.
Yeah, and then she sees him, like, he tries to, like, talk to her, but, like, her reaction is to just scream in his face and then faint.
Yeah. Yeah, which seems like you to be an old maid at that point, you feel like you'd have to be like like stronger as a person because you're like
Right.
Yeah, going about town by yourself, you don't have anybody else to lean on, and Violet is sort of like I don't know if we're implying that Violet is maybe like a woman of the night was sort of what I got
I
because she's
think that's it, like, George was sort of keeping her from going into that and
yeah,
sort of, like, anchoring her to the town and the community, and without him there, she was left to her own devices.
yeah, because it's shortly after we see the sign that's it's like flashing lights like "Girls, girls, girls," which I didn't
Yeah,
realize was existed outside of like a Motley Crue song, so
that's right.
but it was, so we've got that, and George is, he's starting to believe it a little bit more. We've seen where he's trying to run to all the different, like, places in the town to try and find somebody who believes him. He goes to his mother's house, and she's got a boarding house, and we find out that Uncle Billy's been in a lunatic asylum since the business went under, and their old house is still the old damaged house, it's not there.
Right.
And we go to the final scene of that is he goes to what he thinks is Bailey Park, but it's actually, um, a graveyard now,
Yeah, a potter's field.
including his little brother because he wasn't there to save them, and then
Right.
all of the men from the war from that town that because Harry was not there to stop the boat or whatever from getting blown up,
Right,
all of
exactly.
are now dead as well and full of in Potter's Field, and I think this is where he kind of he just wants to go. He just wants it all back. He wants to go home.
Yeah.
He wishes it all away, and then Clarence sort of helps him do that, and oh, no, there's one more scene where he's being chased by the policeman, and that's I think the through line. They're trying to find him
That's
'cause
right, yeah, and it's I think, which one's Bert? Is it Bert or Ernie that who's the police? I can never remember, but he finds him.
yeah, and he's been chasing him through the sequence where George doesn't exist, and then now that back in reality, he's like, "We've all been worried about you, like, you need to come home." This is where we see the iconic scene of George, like, running through the town, and he's happy to see his crashed car and happy to see
Mhm.
the building and loan and
"Merry
happy
Christmas, you old building alone."
and he runs in and he's so happy to see his kids are there, but the bank examiner's there, and there's another policeman there with his arrest warrant, and he's like, "I have a warrant for your arrest," and he's like, "Of course you do," like just,
Mhm.
and he hugs his kids, and then his wife comes home, Mary, and she's like has this surprise. She's like, they're coming," and then that's where we see the
Yeah.
entire town come in and pour all of their money, all of their savings, paying off this debt.
Yes, and finally, the town comes to save him instead of
Yeah.
the other way around.
And then we hear the iconic line of, like, Zuzu's bell. She's like, "Teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings."
Yeah, there's a so I don't know if you ever watched Rocko's Modern Life, the cartoon?
No.
Nickelodeon cartoon. There's a scene in one of the episodes where a kid says to his dad, "My teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings." And the dad turns to him and says, "Yeah, well, your teacher's full of snot." And I lose it every time. It's all I think about when she says this line is I want him to turn to her and say, "Yeah, well, your teacher's full of snot."
And yeah, that's where the film ends there, and it's so good, and I know it's a little bit cheesy, but it's so good, and I think it's so heartfelt.
It is. It's so funny that this is one of those films that just sort of ends. There's very little like denouement. There's almost no. It doesn't play itself out. The way a lot of films do. I've thought the same thing of North by Northwest,
Mhm.
which you've seen it, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So the scene where they're reaching on the Mount Rushmore and he's trying to get her hand, and then the next scene we see is him pulling her up into the bed on the train, and clearly they made it out, but then the film ends and there's no, like, we never see him rescue her off the Mount Rushmore, or like what happens to James Mason, or like, or any of the other characters or anything. It's just like he saves her, he pulls her into the bed on the train, and then the movie ends. So clearly they made it out okay, but like there's no build up and there's no playing out of the film for like the rest of it. And it's just this sort of fits the same thing of where it just ends. It stops. And we assume everyone lived happily ever after.
Yeah, it's like The Sound of Music's like that too. When
Yeah.
they nuns pull the spark plugs or whatever, "Forgive me, make me sister, I have sinned," or
Yep.
"Forgive me, mother," and we see them walking past the area of the Alps where we see, Maria in the opening shot, but that's it.
Yeah.
Did you make it out of Austria? Where are you going?
Right, exactly.
Did you get to Switzerland? Did you escape the I know you're fine because it's somebody wrote a book
Like,
about
right,
this.
we have your story, but we want to see it.
Yeah. It's been 3 hours. You couldn't have added 15 more minutes?
Yeah. I always liked going back to SNL, there's a one with Dana Carvey where he plays Jimmy Stewart in this film, and they show you the never before seen ending where the whole town goes and beats the crap out of Potter. So funny.
Yeah, I mean, I just it's crazy that, like, there's it's so it's just such a good, like, such a good description of, like, our like, a microcosm of, like, what we are dealing with in the world is we have like, there's, like, 6 guys who own more than the bottom, like, 50% of the rest of the
Oh,
globe.
90%. Like, there are
Yeah,
8 people in the world who own 80 to 90% of the wealth in the world, and the rest of us just have the table scraps. That's it.
and it's like, we could physically fight them,
We
like,
could. They're not strong. The money has protected them for this long, but that's all they have is the money.
I think Elon Musk is not that tough. I think I could take him. I work out a lot.
Hey, you know what? Everyone's neck is the same resistance in a guillotine, so
Yeah. Watching some of these, and it's a lot of classic movies now, watching them through the lens of, like, where we're at now, and I'm like, "Oh my why are we still like, we are still making films about shit like this?" Like, I went and saw Wicked last night, and I was like, "This is the same idea." It's just this, like, demonization and, like, this, like, pack mentality that people are so upset, like, so just accepting and willing to look at, like, one villain for stuff. They're like,
mhm.
"Perfect. Thank you for telling me what I."
And you know, the rich love pitting us against each other because it's not left we don't realize a lot of the time it's not supposed to be left versus right. It's supposed to be up versus down or rich versus poor. Like the
Mm,
class warfare is where the change is going to happen. And the problem is you've got the bottom 90% fighting amongst each other instead of fighting the top 10%.
mhm. Yeah, it's crazy because, like, and Potter is this villain, and the entire town knows this the whole
Yeah.
time,
They don't
and
like him.
nothing's done.
He is a everyone he surrounds himself with is paid to be there. He doesn't have friends. He doesn't have a community around him. If he was in the same situation, they would have said, "You, we're done. We're not here to help you. You've ruined our lives."
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting and just such a like a it's just such a timeless film for all
Yeah.
of all of that. Like, I don't and I really hope it's not like, and my hope is that is, it almost becomes not evergreen just based on the fact that maybe one day we don't have to worry about finances in that same way.
I want it to be hey, remember when it used to be like this and how bad it was? Like that's what I want this movie to eventually become.
Yeah, and not go back to stuff like, when you like 10 years ago when you used to watch Schindler's List and you're like, "Wow, we're never gonna do that again."
No, I know, right?
I Yeah, it's very it was so good, and I just just isn't Christmas without this movie, and I'm so glad I returned to it after a couple year break.
Mhm.
It meant so much to me to watch
Yeah,
it.
there are certain films at holiday time that, if I don't watch, then it's not Christmas. Like it's Meet Me in St. Louis, White Christmas, It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street, just like the chestnuts, the staples.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we talked a little bit about it off camera. For me, I have to include um Muppet Christmas Carol in
Yeah.
that year, and then there's my husband and I are big fans of Bob's Burgers, so we do watch, like, all the
Oh
Christmas
yeah.
notes within that show, and then he really likes Elf, so we watch that, and Home Alone, so we watch that
Oh
one.
yeah. Also those, and I watch Die Hard every year.
I'm not a big action person, to be honest, so I don't that's like my like, 80s action is not my or any action movie for the most part is not really my forte, unless it's, like, action adventure, then I can kinda get behind it,
Yeah.
but that's just I don't know, this is a preference thing.
No, I mean, and the '80s were like the best decade for action. Predator and Die Hard, and although I will say a must-watch Christmas season movie, and it is kind of an action movie, but it's more action adventure. Jingle All the Way
With Arnold
with
Schwarzenegger?
Arnold and Sinbad. Yep.
I have not seen that, or if I have, it's been a long time.
Oh my god, you got to watch it again. It's the best. It's pure nostalgia, but I love that movie so much.
I'm pretty sure we own it. I'm pretty sure that arrived with my husband when he brought his own Christmas movies to my
I
collection.
I have to find a room for it because I have a Turbo Man doll, in the box and everything. It looks like it came right out of the movie. But yeah, I love that movie so much.
Yeah, he also makes me watch A Polar Express and A Christmas Story and Christmas with the Cranks, none of which I like.
I love Christmas with the Cranks. That one is one that surprised me that I enjoy that movie as much as I do.
I'm not the biggest I don't know, I'm not really a Tim Allen's sort of doing the same thing in all the stuff. Like, if I'm gonna watch a Tim Allen Christmas, I wanna watch the Santa Claus.
Yeah, I don't watch it so much for him. I watch it for Jamie Lee Curtis,
Yeah,
and for the guy at the end, the one who sort of, like, holds everything together, he's like the forgotten neighbor who drifts in and out, but who sort of saves the day at the very end from the guy trying to rob them. I can't remember his name, he's a great character actor, but, like, I watch it for everybody else, not Tim Allen.
that's fair. Yeah, yeah, that's when we negotiate year by year. He's like, "Would you which one of these 3 will you watch?" And I always pick Christmas with the Cranks above the other 2.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, I will you can put on Polar Express. I'm not watching It's Creep."
I love the Polar Express, but I get it. Like, for some reason, Robert Zemeckis was way into that motion capture stuff, the really uncanny valley animation. A Christmas Carol that he did with Jim Carrey and Gary Oldman and Cary Elwes, it's just, it's perfection. It's just so good.
I don't think I've seen it since I saw it in theaters, like, when it came out, but I don't know if I've had a
It's
viewing of
worth a rewatch. It's just the acting, the voice acting is incredible. You got Colin Firth, you've got who else is in that movie? What's her face from Princess Bride?
Robin Wright.
Robin Wright, I think, plays the wife, Mrs. Cratchit. So, yeah, it's just it's terrific.
Yeah, I think I'm usually, like, a little bit Scrooged out just because 'cause we'll also then watch the Bill Murray Scrooged.
I love Scrooged.
I love it so much. So I can only do the story so many times, and I refuse to forfeit the, like, Muppet Christmas Carol
Yeah.
version of it.
If you like offbeat Christmas films, like Batman Returns is a great one. That takes place at Christmas time. Yeah.
I mean, like, I Will Die in the Mountain that Edward Scissorhands is a Christmas movie, and Little Women is a Christmas
Yes.
movie too.
Edward Scissorhands is a Christmas movie. Little Women, yes, is a Christmas movie. Oh, what was the other one I was gonna say? Ghostbusters 2 is a New Year's movie. I watch that at New Year's every year.
I haven't really thought about that. But I will only watch the 1994 version of Little Women. That's it. That's the one I'm watching.
I have not seen the Saoirse Ronan one.
I have either.
It looks it looks good. It looks like a good movie. It's just not one I have for it's the Winona Ryder one is the one I remember the most.
It's so good. It's perfectly cast. I'm like, I love Timothy Chalamet, but Christian Bale is the only Laurie I want to witness. That's
Yeah.
it. Done. You can remake it all you want. I'm not watching it.
Yeah, and then we watch Newsies every Labor Day.
Well, I should probably let you go and I should probably go, but thank you so, so much for being on.
Before I go, there's one thing I wanted to correct from the last time I was here when you asked me the Pivot questionnaire.
Yes.
My least favorite word is overrated.
Overrated.
Overrated is the worst word. I hear it all the time on TikTok and from people who, this movie's overrated. This is a show is overrated. No, it's not. Overrated is not a thing. Your rating is not the be all end all of how things are judged or rated on whatever scale. Overrated is like a non-criticism, and I absolutely hate that word.
I do feel like it's like people will substitute it for I didn't like that.
Yeah. I think they substitute it for I didn't like that and I don't understand why it's so popular. So they say it's overrated. But it's such a nonsense garbage non-criticism.
Yeah, because I feel like I've heard that a lot about Forrest Gump, which I also don't like, but it's not but it's like, no, you need to like dive into like why you think it's not worthy of the attention it's getting. Like, is
Yeah.
it XYZ or whatever? Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of stuff on TikTok where I'm like, I got a comment because I posted my thoughts on Wicked for Good, like in a
Mhm.
little video or whatever, and somebody commented, and they're like, you people are never happy with anything. And it's like, well, I gave specific criticisms.
I had the same issue with my Frankenstein review. Like, I
Yeah.
outlined exactly what I didn't like about the movie. I gave it a 2.5. It's an okay film. It just could have been better. But people are just arguing in my comments with me about why I'm wrong. It's like, it's my opinion. If you liked it, I don't care. Good. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, it was weird. And it was like, you're never happy with anything. I'm like, I'm pretty sure in the video I stated I loved the first film and had 0 notes.
Right.
I was happy with the first one. That's why this one sucks so much.
And a lot of the flaws with the second one, I hear, are because the second act of the musical isn't as strong as the first. So it's going to have the same problems.
That's what I said too. And it's also too long. We don't need to add songs
No, not so, especially not for Michelle Yeoh, who can't sing. Like,
at all. And like it would have been so much better if they just cut it like something that is dragged on and not as good versus something that's like a tight 90 minutes and not as good will make me feel better about it. And they changed the end. And I saw Dan from Real Takes also pissed off about this. I was like, oh my God, thank God.
yeah, I heard. I have to go see it. I haven't watched
You
it yet.
see me, Dan. Thank you. But yeah, it was just, yeah. But that comment, the like, oh, like you're so negative. It's like, well, you just came across a film criticism page. What did you
Right.
think happening here?
I don't understand just the blind. adoration of everything. I can't do it.
No, no. It's crazy. People are like they're just like in their little camps where they just want to love
They're
everything.
bubbles, yeah,
Yeah. And like it's cool to love something. Like I love Disney, but like you gotta be a tech. I will fully cop to like all their problems and be like, yeah, that
definitely.
you can't be too much of a fan of something. Well, I will let you go, Harry, because I gotta make my kiddo some lunch here.
Yeah, I gotta run too.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming back on.
Thank you. I have loved this. I'm so glad we got to talk about this movie.
Absolutely. Anything else you think of or whatever that you want to come back on, please let me know. And if there's anything I'm reviewing in the next little while that screams Harry to me, I will message you.
Definitely, yeah, definitely keep me in mind.
All right. Thanks so much, Harry.
Talk to you